Greetings and welcome to another NFCYM webinar. I'm Michael Tyson, Director of Ministry Formation at NFCYM, and I'm grateful to welcome over 160 ministry leaders from across the country to today's session. Every family is unique. Some have greater needs. Before we turn it over to our moderator and presenters, let me offer a few helpful hints to those who may be new to the GoToWebinar scene. First, all your microphone connections have been muted. If you experience sound or viewing issues, it's usually connected to the quality of your internet connection locally and/or your speaker default selection. Also, as well as how many programs you might have running or those near you might have running. So if you have any viewing difficulties, try to close out of some of those programs so that it'll improve your view. If your webinar screen disappears, don't worry, click on that blue GoToWebinar flower power icon on your menu bar. It should magically reappear. If you lose your menu bar, look for the red arrow on the right side of your screen and click on that to expand the bar and show all the drop-down menu options. You can adjust the size of your screen as needed by clicking and dragging on the line between the camera view and the slide screen. If let's see, this webinar presentation will last about an hour. We'll hold the question and answers to the end, but we want you to ask questions or make comments at any time during the webinar. I will repost them so that all will be able to see them. The webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email within 2 hours after its completion with a link to the recording. Feel free to share this with your friends. We have 3 handouts for today's session. You'll see them on your menu bar listed under handouts. You need to download these handouts during the webinar in order to be able to access them. So please start doing that now. If you have any issue downloading the handouts or you're watching this by video, please email me and I will be happy to send you those handouts. My email is mike.t@nfcym.org. That's all I have for on my end of things, but I'll be sticking around in the background, checking on how things are going. But now it's my pleasure to turn things over to our moderator from Bridgeport, Connecticut, Evan Pensick. Evan?
Thank you, Michael. Once again, I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. And every family is unique. Some have greater needs, which is presented in conjunction with NFCYM and NCPD. Make sure you know what those stand for. There'll be a test at the end of today's webinar for our acronyms today. Let's take a moment though and begin as we do all things with prayer. So let's take just a minute to quiet ourselves. And we begin in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Spirit of God, present among us, you grace us with abilities that we freely share in hopes of building up your kingdom on earth. All ministry, the disability ministry, is your ministry. We thank you and praise you for every opportunity to serve your people, especially those very beloved by you, persons sometimes overlooked or invisible in the world. We ask for your blessings and guidance on our humble efforts to accompany persons with disabilities and their families within the full life of the church. Thank you for ministry leaders who, through their sincere love and acceptance of the entire body of Christ, are transforming the world we live in, one diocese, one parish, one family at a time. May the blessing of God be upon us, giving us knowledge to guide us, courage to support us, and always love to unite us in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
So it is my great honor to introduce our 2 presenters today. First, we have Charleen Katra, who is the Executive Director for the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, and Esther Garcia, who is the Director of Outreach and Diocesan Relations, also for NCPD. So I would like to hand it off to them. And if you have any questions, as always, present them in the chat box, and then I will come back at the end for the last 10 minutes to present those questions.
Thank you, Evan. We have for you today a question we want to start with, a bit of a reflection to kind of call us to the topic of disability ministry. So we've been living in a most unusual, unbelievable time in 2020. So we pose this question to you looking at post-pandemic, and in the prayer that we get back to some more togetherness in the semi-near future. So post-pandemic, how might you imagine your ministry could be more inclusive to better accompany persons with disabilities and their families in the full life of the church? So we're going to let you reflect on that, and I ask that you continue to reflect on that long after this webinar. Hopefully throughout it, we'll give you some strategies, ideas through the discussion and dialogue. You'll have a lot of good things to take to prayer, I hope, in this regard to that reflection question. And we'll also give you a bit of a challenge at the end to continue that reflection. So speaking of disability, I'll tell you a brief story about a gentleman I met years ago. I went to a national conference for the disability ministry. When I went to that conference, this gentleman was a panelist the night I walked in. They had already begun. Each panelist was telling their story of a disability that they had. Each had a different disability. This gentleman's story, he had his disability was a physical disability. He had neither of his forearms. He had lost them both probably 25 years before I met him in a work-related accident where he was a supervisor of a machine shop, and the work that the machine shop did was they cut steel. So when one of the machines was malfunctioning, it's a terrible, little bit of a gruesome story to start with, but it brings home our message of disability and how we speak about it. He was telling the story about how he had an employee, he was a supervisor, mentioned to him that the machine was malfunctioning. So as the supervisor, he pulled the employee and went to check the machine himself. Unfortunately, that machine did malfunction again, and that is how Henry lost his forearms. So again, I meet him 25 years post-injury. In his sharing, he referred to himself as a gimp. Now, probably a lot of people may be listening to this webinar. That's not in their vernacular. It's not a commonly used word for someone with a disability. But again, when he was injured, that was the term, a common term used for someone with a disability, especially a physical disability. So that's how he self-identifies. So when I talk to you today about how do we speak about someone with a disability, and I know you've already been advised that we have provided you a handout that's titled People First Language. The resource we gave you in particular is a secular resource. It's not a Catholic resource, but nonetheless a good resource. And that short one-page kind of information sheet is helpful to teach you about what's called People First or Person First language. And it simply reminds us that anybody who has a disability is much more than their disability or their diagnosis. And that we, certainly as leaders in the church in particular, and hopefully as Christians and Catholics, always want to respect the dignity of the person since we're all made in God's image. So we want to put the person always before the person's disability or diagnosis. Some of you know, if not, I'll just briefly say, before I got to my current and very new position as Executive Director of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, I served for 20 years overseeing the ministry with persons with disabilities in the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, where I would often get calls from leadership in parishes, and they would say sometimes on the phone to me, or someone might just bump into me and tell me about an autistic girl or a Downs boy. These were the things that to me were opportunities to educate them about language. And so again, as the sheet, your handout indicates, and I reinforce today hopefully with you, as you learn, please help us teach others too, to put that person first. So it's a child, girl, boy, who has a diagnosis of Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy. But that person, and of course, more importantly, if you know their name, Charleen has a diagnosis of autism, or Charleen lives with, even more importantly, because people live very full functioning lives with diagnoses, correct, and disabilities. So that's just a brief comment or two to begin with on speaking on disability. And the last caveat I will mention is when Henry referred to himself as a gimp. When I had the blessing of sitting next to him in a small group session the next day, and we stayed after the session and talked, I told him I would never call him a gimp. I knew I wouldn't. It certainly goes against our social justice teachings about the dignity of the person. And I knew that people first language was more respectful. But what I also learned, and from him, and I again continue always to educate others, is language changes over time in a variety of fields for hopefully good reasons. You know, we get educated, we're evolving, we learn a better way to be more pastoral in our case as church. And so we want to lean into what we know is a better practice today. And the other thing is to remember, I don't tell Henry or others who have a disability or diagnosis how to self-identify. That's very different than how I, as a leader, will frame those words. And remember, the way we say people first language also relates not only how we say it verbally. Remember when you're writing articles or maybe your diocesan paper or magazines, if you have opportunities to educate others as well, because many times people just don't know otherwise. And we've all heard the national campaigns to remove the word, the R word for retarded. So some things get a little more attention than others. So they've kind of made a dent in helping us turn that corner. But I just wanted to start by talking about that briefly. The other thing we can't not talk about, of course, is barriers on our campuses or in our homes. And I say also in our hearts, because on this you can see we put a picture of two different things. One shows a physical barrier, right? The other one shows an attitudinal barrier. So when some of our individuals with disabilities or also their entire families, I always say sometimes have the courage to come to Mass or the courage to get involved in faith formation offerings at campuses, anything, even really just going to a local store. Some of you listening, I'm sure statistically already know and love someone with a disability, and I suspect also are either parents or grandparents even of persons who have a disability. So you know that even though people's motivation may not be to do harm, some of those stares and glares that are received, and maybe people think they're not seen and felt, but they often are. And of course, they certainly don't feel good to those on the receiving end. So those are just things we can talk about and raise awareness about as well. Physical barriers, much easier to remove than the attitudinal barriers, unfortunately. So we can build a ramp, we can, get some grant monies and put a chair lift. We can invest in some assistive listening devices for the hard of hearing. We can maybe hopefully invest in an electronic door opener for a main door that people come and go through, which really benefits many people. But the attitudinal barriers, we're talking about conversion of heart now. And I've always said, every parish wants the same thing for their faith community. They want conversion, right? And I've always said, if you really want conversion for your people, get people with disabilities involved in the full life of your church, because by their presence, God uses them to touch hearts.
Let's try to check our disability IQ with these questions. How many children have a diagnosis of autism? And you can select one of the following: 1 in 59, 1 in 88, or 1 in 34. And just to remind you, the autism is a developmental disorder, varies from person to person, and individuals may lack of social skills, and they will present repetitive behaviors. Those are signs of persons who have autism. And let's see, we have the results. We can release. Wow, we did good. This is 49%, 1 in 59, and 13. So let's check the right answer. It's 1 in 59. So the 49% was good, and we hope that we can help you to create more awareness about all disabilities in your community.
Great job on getting that one right. Got a few more for you, but you did good on the first one for sure. This is a diagnosis that is on the rise in the world. So anything that's on the rise in the world, it's no different in our faith communities. We have a picture here in particular of Temple Grandin, Dr. Temple Grandin. Some of you may be very familiar. She's probably one of the most internationally known self-advocates of someone who has autism. We've got a couple of her quotes up there that I think bring home some things, especially to us as catechetical leaders and catechists, youth ministers, etc. Because it speaks about the educational aspect of her brain, which might be, every brain is different, and that's a good thing. But for someone with autism, and in particular, she says of herself, right? I am a visual thinker, okay? She's not a language-based thinker. Her brain is like Google Images. That alone is a visual you can get your head around, so to speak, because you have gone to Google Images to search for those kind of pics you need. And when you talk about how someone's brain is different, the other thing that happens is, again, the ability to be verbal or nonverbal. For her, her other quote talks about, she remembered when she was, let's say in her case, because now she's able to speak aloud, when she was younger and she had not either had the therapies or developmentally, she was delayed, so that language didn't come till later in life for her. Her quote there that says, you know, I remember when I couldn't talk. She knew what she wanted. She just didn't have the words or even the ability to speak words, maybe already known, but again, not able to get them out. So what would she do? She would scream. So if you've ever seen someone with autism in particular, kind of a bit of a commonality, especially if they go into a meltdown, if they get overstressed and they end up in a meltdown mode, they may lash out, they may, you know, they're not listening anymore to anyone around them, they're not able to, okay? They're really, that's just a reaction to sensory overload, which we're going to talk about also in a little bit. I always use the analogy of the toddler in a pediatrics waiting room. You can go to a doctor, you can have an appointment, but that doctor might get delayed. And, you know, all these folks are sitting around in a waiting room until a toddler who doesn't have words, they may throw themselves down on the middle of a floor and just basically have a tantrum, you know, cry, shout. What is the child saying? He doesn't have or she doesn't have words, but we get the message again. And the point is, all behavior is communication. That child is expressing that they can't take it anymore. They need to go home. They need to eat. They need to rest. But they're basically telling you something by their behavior. So when you have someone in front of you, and I'll tell you, when I say children, I mean children of God, any age. Because when you have a disability, typically you have that disability. Most disabilities or diagnoses, you're going to have them all your life. Sometimes you acquire a disability later in life, but predominantly the ones we're speaking about today, you have them all your life. So whether, again, the person's in grade school, high school, or in an adult faith formation program, they may still struggle with some of these issues that we speak about today. Again, we show you here, autism it's called a spectrum disorder, just for the fact that there's no two people alike. Okay, everyone, there are some common traits, but they're all individual and unique. Okay, so routines are very, very helpful. They will really crave routines, which is good. We are a church. We have a lot of rituals. You know, the mass always the same. You have someone who has autism who's an altar server. If liturgy goes a little different than it's supposed to, they'll tell other people. They'll call you back to what is the routine. So they can be very regimented in some ways, but routine is good for them. So in the home now, in home-based kind of catechesis at the moment that we're doing, and other educational curriculum, full curriculum, be it in the home or in a formal setting, routine is king, or queen. So they need and want that very much. That's helpful. It lowers their anxiety. The less cluttered an environment is, these things all help calm someone who, again, has very high anxiety levels day in and day out. Okay, be clear and direct. Use less words. Sometimes we say more words than is necessary. I know I'm bad about that, probably more often than not. So to try and use less words with someone, because their processing is delayed. It takes them more time to hear our words and then understand what was said to them. Okay, Always use words and pictures. Esther's going to talk a little bit more about the benefits of visuals in a few minutes, but we always want to have pictures and words, hence even a PowerPoint, and we put photos and graphics in it. It's good to see as well as hear some things. This is a great adage to remember, this next one. They need twice as much time to do half as much work, right? So either give them 20 minutes instead of 10 if you're asking other people to do something in 10 minutes, or if you're asking someone to, you know, answer 4 questions, maybe it's the other way. You only say you only have to discuss 2 questions. So either twice as much time or half as much work, because that will serve them better, and you too. And then lastly, of course, just an awareness that they may have some behaviors that don't seem typical, but you just have to know that even though someone might give you eye contact all the time, we know that that also is no guarantee that someone's really paying attention to what you're saying. So don't use that as your only marker of attention.
The benefits of using visuals, like Charleen said, they're very important for all learners, not just the children with autism. Visuals are permanent, and the words like disappear for them, and they help. The visuals help for transition and help them to be organized, to follow the routine that Charleen mentioned. Allow time for language processing. They need time to respond. Sometimes we want, we ask something and we want the response immediately. And we need to allow time for them to process the information. Also, someone can see what you mean. You can see the picture. They are neutral, so they don't have any attitude. The visuals, they don't have the attitude, any mood is just neutral. And help, I would say, help all the learners. And the good of visuals is the person, the learner can have them with them. They're transferable. They can go with them. They can be a schedule. It's cards that help to communicate. So it's very important. And it's also the symbols like prayer hands. They help you when you made it. You have the visual of the hands is for start a prayer or to say amen when they receive the sacraments. Something simple, but you will benefit a child, a young adult or youth who have a disability. And it's time for our next question. How many children live daily with sensory processing challenges? And select 1 in 12, 1 in 9, or 1 in 6. Sensory processing is a process by which the brain receives all the sensory information, all the input, and how to interpret this information for use. It's everything that they receive, sounds, smells, and lights. And wow, very fast. So we'll see. 1 to 12, 24, 1 to 9, 54, 1 to 6. Good. Thank you for answer. Let's see who's the. And the answer is 1 in 6 children. Actually,
It is correct. It is 1 in 6, which is a little larger number, so to speak, statistically, than I think you were guessing. It's important to know when you look at a group of people in front of you that it's that many. It's 1 in 6. A lot of reasons people talk about how when we were young, I know myself, I spent a lot of time, especially this time of year, just out running and playing. And, again, movement is good for the brain. So we used to be maybe more active in other ways. And as many of you can probably guess, and there's a lot of writing right now about the fact that technology, though it has a lot of benefits, has people being a little more sedentary than they might have been in years past, especially in developmental years, brain development years, youth, young adult years. So that might be one reason why we're showing a little more high statistic on that.
And I have this slide about how a person with sensory processing disorder can feel. Sometimes they hate having brush their hair, wash the hair or cutting. They are overly sensitive to loud sounds, and they have trouble to focusing and concentrating themselves in the activities of schools. And something that is very, very important to watch for us as a catechist educators, they have poor fine motor skills, such as handwriting and cutting, and also the poor grass motor skills, like running or using a bike. Sometimes they are unaware of normal touch or pain. Some of them, they picky eaters, and other person, they don't like to be touched or cuddled, and those happen very frequently on persons who have these sensory issues. And I know I experienced, because I have a son who's now 16 years old, and he has many of these characteristics when he was little, and still continue that. He still have problem with the sensitive to loud sounds. Is not to pick eater anymore. I still has some issues, and I was working with him for just to work with the fine motor skills with a cloth pin. That's something very simple, and helps and allowed to the fine motor skills to practice and to better. And he drew this boy. I asked him to draw something, and this reminds us that persons who have sensory processing, they have our disabilities, they have gifts that to share with the faith community, and we just have to give it the opportunity. Our kids are more than the diagnosis of the disability. It's just they have many gifts to share, and also we just, as a catechist and teacher and mom, I see the benefits of when the community help my son beside just my family. That's just it's a beautiful gift as a parents we receive from the community, to support him in his faith, in his daily life.
Thank you, Esther. I love that. I like the clothespin. I hadn't seen that one before. I like that, but that's great for helping someone, work on their fine motor skills. Very nice, yeah. And again, as Esther said, and her son drew that little graphic for us yesterday, actually, and it does highlight the fact that, yes, he may have a diagnosis of autism, but that's just one thing that describes him. He has many gifts and is a blessing to his family and to the world. So we always want to emphasize that. The next slide here, it highlights some fidgets. You may have some of these already. You may utilize, certainly hope you have the rosary. I always use the rosary as, the original fidget, right? So especially as church, this is something that people can, we use it in a meditative prayer, but again, it can also be helpful for someone that needs things to hold and just, again, the word fidget, kind of fidget with, so that they can focus while someone's speaking to them or while they're saying a prayer. It's just a tangible item that is most helpful. Fidgets generally are small, quiet. The other picture you see there is something like this. It just wiggles and you twist it in different shapes. So it's semi-quiet, it's small, it can often be handheld, just like the rosary. And again, we even have the original fidget. Now, the fidgets that got real popular a few years ago, they are not really recommended. And why? Because they tend to get people they're more distracting than calming. So you want a fidget typically to be something that bring someone more peace and calm in their moment, especially, like I said, with those who have higher anxiety levels. Not all fidgets, though, or manipulatives need to be calming. Some do. There are times when people need to be calmed, but there are also times when people need to be alerted. So I think we have some other photos that show some other manipulatives that will help people. Esther, if you can just advance one more slide. There you go, thanks. The headphones now, of course, are helpful if you want to just have people cut the noise out sometimes. And again, we might be in a situation that it doesn't seem noisy for us. For someone else, a smaller group of people having a conversation, could be too noisy for another person. So having just some headphones available, especially when you have groups gathered, especially groups of youth, that there's music involved. When I think of youth conferences in particular, that's always been in more recent years, more and more conversation we've had with planners to have some kind of calming space or a calming area where people can go if they need it. You know, and I always kind of jokingly but seriously, sometimes it's the leadership that needs to go take a break and get back to a peaceful state or calmed down, you know. So again, it goes back to what some people need is really good for everybody. Okay, it's kind of like, I think, universal design, if you've ever heard of universal design. It's that same idea. What is planned for so that everybody can access, whether it's physical, architecturally, or in this case, I would say sensory wise. So headphones, a baseball cap can be another one that can be easily, if you can go back, Esther. The baseball cap can be the other one that can help cut light out sometimes. The other one we have a picture of is a mini trampoline, because like I said, sometimes people need to be calmed down. And just stop, I'll catch up, Esther, if it can't get back.
I'm trying to get back. Yes, sorry.
The trampoline will help alert someone. So sometimes you might have someone who's gotten a little more lethargic and they need to be alerted. So taking a 5 or 10 minute break to go jump on a trampoline, if not do some other kind of calisthenics or movement activity, can help kind of wake someone up a little bit if they need that. So it could go either way, or you see the little water kind of volcano there. And the other one on this page that I've got up there is this pencil topper. Now it's a very hard rubber designed specifically to be chewed on. Now, again, as I always say, it's a one-time use, right? But this can be very helpful in allowing someone to have a more socially appropriate behavior than what? And remember how Esther talked about on the little graphic of the little boy that had all the characteristics of someone on the spectrum? And one of those might be just, you know, they need to chew a lot. So what do? They grab their t-shirt and they chew on their t-shirt or on their shirt sleeve. So not very socially appropriate. And if you want to help people not be bullied in social situations, when that's their weakness, this is one way for someone that just needs something, you know, kind of, you know, orally in their mouth to focus and be calm. That would be a great suggestion. And the last thing I just want to say before we leave kind of this topic of autism, we said it earlier, we can't reiterate it enough. When we talk about people first language and person first language, about respectful, accurate communication about people, please remember, and as you educate others, also educate them that we do not tell someone how to self-identify, okay? Because that will come from generally the time and place of the vernacular or the words that were used, the terminology that was used when they were born and raised and grew up with this diagnosis, or maybe like in my story of Henry at the beginning of the webinar, he acquired it later in life, but that was the term that he kind of, you know, embraced, as was the world embracing at that time. So don't tell someone how to self-identify, just try and again, if you make a mistake and you use an older term, which today the older terms would be handicapped, or even more current, but still I would ask you try to move forward from, is the word disabled. Because I use this analogy, if you check the traffic report before you go out to go to work or the store or anywhere, and especially more so when we were using our cars and traveling a little more, we check that traffic report because sometimes it might tell us that there's a disabled vehicle on a certain street or freeway. In that story, in that instance, that disabled vehicle connotated a broken down car, a problem, something not working. If you heard that, if you had a choice or an option, you would go a different way. You'd take a different route to work to avoid the hazard over here. So that's why for us, again, as church, I can't refer to a person made in the image and likeness of God as disabled. They're a person with a disability, or a person who has a diagnosis, or living with anything but some of those older terms. And again, I say, if you by nature of even sometimes our age, we've been using another word so long, you might use it again. Don't beat yourself up. You know, it's progress, not perfection. And just, you know, kind of keep this new message in your mind. And more importantly, like I said, attitudinally in your heart. And I think you'll see yourself make the shift. And use the handout as a reference if you forget. And the same goes, I'll say lastly, for restrooms, parking spaces. If you have an opportunity, if campus is redoing some signage, instead of having it say handicapped restroom and parking, it might say accessible. That would be the other way to, people always say, what do you say about that? It's accessible restroom, accessible parking. Okay, if that helps. And I think the next thing we wanted to talk about, we're very excited. Just a week ago, right? We just found out about the new directory for catechesis. It's been released from the Vatican. We have this one quote, and we have it in English, though we do not have the document available yet in English. You can certainly pre-order it through USCCB. But it's got the statement that we highlighted on here that reiterates what the church has always said about the disability community. And that is that they have a right to receive their sacraments, okay, and to live a sacramental life. This new document, in this one statement in particular, that Esther, who has a copy so far, I think came out earlier in Spanish, was able to translate this one for us to show you today from the document. And it says, no one can deny sacraments to people with disabilities. The history is, real brief on history, years ago, people would bring their child to be baptized, right? And that child may have a disability. We would baptize the baby, but then when the family came back for other sacraments of initiation, in particular Eucharist, and of course also in this audience's domain often later in life when they came back to be confirmed, those other, and Eucharist of course along the way, they were often told that the child didn't need it, the child was an angel. There was a lot of things that used to be said to families about their children, partly as we weren't prepared to prepare them for sacraments as much as we are today. So praise God, we're in 2020 now, a lot of new resources. Publishers have been paying attention and listening to the cry of the leadership as well as the families. So we've got things now that we can use that are more adapted and appropriate for diverse learners. So that's a help. So, but when they used to come and they were denied those sacraments, again, the motivation wasn't to do harm, but obviously that didn't exactly affirm that family's Catholic identity as we would hope to do and tried to do so hard today. So just know that, that we're moving forward on that. Obviously, NCPD exists, the National Catholic Partnership on Disability in particular, to help our dioceses and our parishes as well as our families make sure, because every Catholic that's baptized, they have 3 baptismal rights. It's to be educated in their faith, to be prepared and to celebrate their sacraments, and to respond to God's call. So that's 3 baptismal rights every Catholic has. So again, if you need help in those areas, I can help you. Esther can help you. Our office can help you. The next slide, really, I put this slide up because, again, as I told you, I just came out of working in Galveston-Houston Archdiocese, and this is Cardinal DiNardo there. A few years ago, on more than one occasion, we offered archdiocesan-wide an adapted confirmation preparation formation opportunity for anyone chronologically over 16 years of age who had already received their first Eucharist. Even if they weren't from the parish that we did the preparation at, they were able to come to this. We had to get Cardinal's permission for that, which of course typically your ordinary would grant, but you would have to ask for that first. It's a little unusual or not typical. But they came, and their program, just so you know briefly how we did this, one thing families and parents have always said to us and to me back when I was in the diocesan office, oh, Charlene, our son, our daughter, they could never go for a weekend retreat for confirmation formation, correct? Which we know is more typical, that there's 1 or probably sometimes 2 retreats over a couple-year period that they may experience. Great blessing. But for our community, that might not be, again, something that they can do. I've always said, sacraments in particular, should be a joyful experience for everybody involved. If it's not joyful for everybody involved, certainly the candidate and their family, but as well as the leadership, the clergy, all of us, we're doing something wrong if it's not a joyful experience, right? Because it's about receiving God's grace. So what they would say to me about how they're so concerned about the retreat. So what we offered was about a 9-month preparation. Their whole formation was done in 9 months. They would come together at one parish, large parish in Houston that hosted it, and they would only come 2 hours a month on a Saturday from 3 to 5. And that was their formation. Now, again, they were coming from different parts of the diocese. So oftentimes the families would just stay with them because obviously they were being driven there and they would just stay. So we usually had the families together, though we had other rooms that families could have gone to, but most of them just stayed and enjoyed getting to know each other and all being together. And so 2 hours of formation, taught in a very multisensory approach, using some newer resources that we have today to do so. Loyola Press was certainly one that was utilized. University of Dayton, Sacraments, Gifts for All was another one often utilized, and our blending of some different pieces from different ones. And that's how we did the 2 hour sessions. The retreat that they were so concerned about, we built it as a family retreat. About the 4th or 5th session in this process, that day was about a 5 or 6 hour day because it would start with lunch. So we started with, breaking bread basically and sharing a meal together. Then they had formation all afternoon. We focused on the Beatitudes. So we picked a theme. Ours was the Beatitudes. And they just had different prayer opportunities, videos and discussions and art projects that helped that 5 hours unfold. And then we ended with all attending the vigil mass at the parish community. The last piece that was also very helpful was that the youth minister and the youth preparing for confirmation from that parish that hosted us had regular confirmation candidates from the parish program that served as buddies, a small group, like 2 for 1, that regularly attended as buddies with our formation group. And so by the time the celebration came and that long communal mass, you can see by the smiles on the clergy and this young girl being confirmed, and you barely can see him, but the tall gentleman to the far left is her twin brother, right behind her sister, who is actually her sponsor. That family had 4 children. 3 of the 4 have a diagnosis of autism. And interestingly, going back to that earlier statistic, as I told you on the rise, it is getting more and more common to have families with multiple children with a diagnosis of autism. Wasn't quite so much that way 20 years ago. It's very, very much so now. Since I've been in DC, I already know one family. The gentleman actually serves on our board. He has 6 children. They all are on the spectrum. So again, that's why, again, I think we need to also be very educated, very prepared.
Thank you, Charleen. And we're so excited to let you know that we know we're still celebrating the renewal of the guidelines for the celebration of the sacraments with persons with disabilities. That was revised for the USCCB on 2017. And it's still we're still promoting because it's a great tool for ministry leaders. And you can see they're for sale in the UCCB store, and also you can have it for free, the Spanish version of the guidelines for persons with disabilities in our website, an NCPD website. You can go to ncpd.org and just go and check and ask for your free copies, and from 10 to 100, whatever you need, we're happy to help. And we can do this with the OSB Institute. We're very grateful for their support, and they're free thanks to the OSB Institute. And there is a great resource for ministry leaders that work with the Hispanic community. But we have to be sensitive, not just with Hispanic, but also with all the cultures. Many of our families with different cultural perspective, they believe they hide their families, the person with disabilities. You don't see them in the church. In some cultures, they think it's a sin to have a disability. Others, you have to outreach to them. Especially when they see a physical disability. But when you don't see a disability or disability that is invisible, how you can reach to them, how you can meet their needs. And some of the tips that we can let you know is just to ensure in your magazine, in your website, in your communications, is that you're welcome the families who have a disability, and just need to communicate with them how you can support them. the rate of divorce in their families is 80%. And I see by experience because I work with these families. They need our help. They need respite care. They need support. They just need resources. Whatever you can give to them, they will be very grateful for your support. As a ministry leaders, you can open many doors. And this is our perfect opportunity, especially in this time of the pandemic and different, very difficult time for families losing their jobs and especially the persons with disabilities who have conditions. It's hard for them to go in public places. When you do your faith formation, when you do your sacrament preparation for confirmation or for families to reach out to the families, just to ensure that you provide some ways to connect with those families who have children and youth with disabilities. Try to ensure in your program they have activities for them, and they will say something that we really had to work with the families, especially because they're so very private, they're so quiet, and we had to outreach to them. They have the bad theology. They say it's a sin to have a disability, and we had to teach the theology that God came for all of them, especially for those, the poor, the sin, who have disabilities. That's the mission of Christ. And last question. What percentage of the youth in the United States between the ages of 6 and 17 experience a mental health disorder in 2016? Is 12%, 16.5%, or 24%? And we said that mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. And sometimes what happens with mental illness, you don't see that you can see the smile, but you don't see the person who's suffering that isolation or depression. So it's very important to be in contact. It's 12%, 9%, 60.5%, 47%, 24%. Good numbers. Let's see the answer.
Got that one right. 16.5%. Now, again, this statistic, as you can see, was from 2016 because it's the most current one listed, and that's on the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses website. The acronym is NAMI, N-A-M-I. If you're not familiar with NAMI yet, please check them out. They are a free secular resource. They have presenters that can come out and give presentations for groups. You just really need to provide them space. If we get back to coming together again, gathered, I'm sure they're willing to do things even like this, webinars, and do things virtually right now as well as for training. And again, I definitely know in English and Spanish, possibly, I think even in some other languages, but just know them as a resource, and they are national, so many of you can find them. And obviously their website is a wealth of information. And like we've been talking about today, living and still in really the pandemic, these numbers, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, autism being on the rise, there's really two diagnoses, and this is the second one that unfortunately are on the rise in the world and no different in our faith communities, and that is people that are living with mental illness. And they have a variety of maybe different diagnoses and different symptoms and needs, but that number is gonna, again, I fear but yet believe that number is going to even keep going up exponentially. So we're working very hard at NCPD as well to, can you advance again, Esther, how we were being responsive to that. The church has a lot more we can do in this area for sure. Just some graphics here to bring this home a little bit, and especially the kind of the wording on the one side of your screen there that talks about people being in pain, being depressed, maybe spiritually bankrupt, really in a bad place emotionally and spiritually, which is important for us as church. But what do we do sometimes on the outside or the front? You smile. So we just want to bring that to your attention to say this is this is such a big need that we have the dialogue and we have conversations about this, and that faith communities and families, it starts really even in just a local microcosms, a family, that there are places where people feel safe to talk about. And I always tell people, don't, you think about other people sometimes, don't forget to check on your own family, your own friends. They may be, especially in this climate we're living in. A lot of people, even in ministry right now, I hear it daily, losing jobs, being furloughed, those things lead sometimes to loss of certainly income, maybe housing, et cetera, domino effect. So people have lost loved ones. I mean, we have a lot of people that are hurting right now on a lot of levels. So can't be sensitive enough to people's mental state. So that's important. Again, being responsive from NCPD, we've created a pastoral response. It's kind of a brochure we created years ago. It is now available both in English, and we just started to send to the printers the Spanish version. I want you to know about that. That was designed specifically for the church. Also, on here, you'll see 2 prayer cards that you can receive, and even in bulk for free, through the Katie Foundation. We have the links on our website. One of our board members, Deacon Ed Schoner, he himself, his daughter died by suicide in semi-recent years. So he created the Katie Foundation in her name. You can read more about it on the site, where you can get the free saint cards. Saint Dymphna and Saint John of God are kind of the male and female saints held up as patrons for those with mental illness. So please know about that, and know that we invite you to check out that link on our website for those resources. Additional resources, of course, with directly out of COVID-19, NCPD had a response that was put out, the document you see there with the medical looking staff, and that was our response to the rights of people with disabilities to medical treatment. Because as you know, and unfortunately is too common, people, by virtue only of having a disability, sometimes when they're trying to decide who gets a ventilator, or even in this case, who gets certain medicines, it will go to someone, the way it's sadly been said, I've heard, is it's from, I will say, like, kind of burden to benefit, I mean, if they think someone's life is more of a burden and won't benefit as much, they might give it to someone else. Well, that's, yeah, we don't want people making subjective choices like that. So that's why we wrote this statement. It's available in English and Spanish, so that if you are an advocate for someone else, or others that need that, we want you to check it out and read that on our website and share it with others. The other 2 resources that have recently come out from NCPD, one is, speaking of disability, we kind of started today by talking about that. This document will be available soon in both languages, and English and Spanish. It will help you not only know the words to use, as I said, but it will also get into even what kind of icons do you use and what do they stand for, especially in print materials. So we want to educate people more about that. That document will probably be for sale in the near future for, I'm sure, a nominal cost, but we want you to know about it. The LAM, which stands for Language Accessibility, Meaningful Participation and Belonging, is another document we recently created, and it was created by our Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. We have a Council on Mental Illness, and we have a Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And this was a survey that parishes can use. You can download it on our website to help you kind of see how accessible, and again, not just physically, but even attitudinally, your campus and your community is. So feel free to check that out as well when you can. And then I think we just have also from the Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. In recent months, they have now started posting for them on our website, adapted faith formation lessons for families. So again, things that they can use in their homes when they're working with, being that, the domestic church that they are, and really now they've been called more intentionally, obviously, into being the primary catechist, which we know that they are by being the parent. But so we've got some lessons, and the link that's on this screen right here in particular that we're going to provide is actually to this month. So in every month they're going to have a different theme. This month theme for the month of July is freedom. So they have some lessons that will, in scripture verses and things that families can do together on that topic. So we wanted you to know about that. I had the blessing of being invited to co-author a book last year, The Adaptive Teacher. So speaking of, again, from the pandemic, we've learned that we can adapt. We've adapted to working remotely. We've done a lot of adaptations in this year that we weren't expecting to do. And, you know, the homeschool, the home-based schooling, catechetically, even across full curriculum from other school settings. It was a challenge, no doubt. Probably anything that is worthwhile is going to be a challenge, but I think everybody's embraced it pretty well. We're going to keep getting better at it naturally. So the adaptive teacher, some of the things we taught you and shared with you today certainly flowed from that and from, you know, again, our own lived experiences of working and serving this community. So that's one thing also you could, you know, I guess consider looking for if you want to hear more on this topic. And lastly, we kind of are going to share with you our prayer, okay? So our prayer is, and Esther, you can pull it up for me, and so that they can see what our prayer is. Our prayer is that you will commit to make changes so that persons with disabilities and their families can meaningfully participate in your faith community. So going back to the first question we started with, and even ending with this one, we ask you to respond to the call of all that you've heard today.
Thank you, Charlene and Esther. So much great information and so many great resources. We do have a couple of questions that, with the few minutes we have left. First, if you didn't notice, during some of you asked for some of the graphics and information that was on there. During it, we added one of the handouts. If you go to the handout section, those are a PDF of all the slides that you just saw in this presentation. So if you go to that, you can download that now before the webinar ends, and you'll have all the slides and all the resources that were just talked about there. One of the questions that was asked was specifically now, as you spoke about, you know, with everything going on with COVID-19 and virtual teaching, you know, and obviously the challenge that presents also with having to teach virtually, but also those who have, you know, specifically this person said, I have a neighbor whose grandson is autistic and uses an electronic whiteboard to communicate. Have you heard of this? So just something about, you know, now in the realm of us teaching virtually, what are some of these tools and things that we can also do to connect with people who have disabilities as well?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of electronic whiteboards over the years. I don't know about, you know, this exact person she's speaking of, but it does not surprise me. I would certainly say any kind of electronic device and medium right now is really primary. I mean, all of the Google Meet or the, you know, the WebEx and the et cetera, the GoToMeetings, any of those things that you can gather people together for, you know, whether, and I would say with this community, it might not be large group because, you know, seeing a lot of faces on a Zoom call or some of those things, I know even for myself in groups of several people at once on there, it can be kind of hard to find which one is speaking, you know. So for our people who have a lot of sensory overload already, I would say you might want to, if you do things like that, and I encourage you to connect with families electronically, because and if a family or a child or individual already has a resource, be it a fidget or be it electronic, a whiteboard or something that they use, that's ideal. Again, use your resources wisely. They already have them. Ask families, what do you have? What do you use at home? Can we tap into that and work, you know, collaborate, accompany you that way by reaching out and visiting with your family or your loved one through that technology that you already use. There is a lot available, and again, I would say we absolutely want to lean into it. Esther, do you have any other thoughts?
Yes, we hear from other families that it's very challenging for them to have the therapies and the communications with the therapists. And I also recommend to adapt ourselves. Instead of having the small group in the classroom, is the small group, you know, it can be a video phone, it can be just a call, and also communicate with the family. They will let you know what is the best way to reach to them. It can be a call, it can be a Zoom meeting, just to have the communication and accompany them in faith. This is the time that they need it most because the kids that they need these skills, their communications, because if not, they will lose some of them. But still, we need to teach a new routine because some of the kids, they don't want to do the Zoom meetings, but we have to ensure they have any learning academy and activity.
Great, thank you. It is almost the top of the hour, so I know some people will have to go, but no worries. There are a few more questions. If some of you want to hang around just for a few more minutes, we'll answer those questions. But if you do have to run, you will be emailed this recording in a couple hours, so you'll be able to get to those. The next question comes from Melissa, and she says that she has a special needs ministry for, and she uses Sacraments kits, which have rosaries that are made of fuzzy beads for textured individuals. Have these been tried in other parishes? And also, what can you do if your pastor, sorry, I just left, if your pastor will not let you use fidgets?
Okay, I'll tell you what, if they won't let you use fidgets, there's some other things you probably already have that, you know, I often use even just show people Velcro. I mean, Velcro is just a product you have in every workroom or even in your home work, you know, space. And it sounds like, well, that doesn't sound like a fidget because it's not quiet because you think of tearing it apart. But what I tell people is Velcro can just be put underneath the lip of a table or a desk, honestly. And depending on whether the person prefers to feel something rough or feel something soft, you've got two sides to that Velcro. Take the side that appeals to that learner and just put it underneath the lip of, a table or a desk where you don't even see it. And again, even on dignity of the person, nobody even knows they have something there, but yet it's something that they can be touching and while they're attending. And again, I don't think a pastor, it's not like going to be like something like this where he's going to come in and see it and say, well, that's a toy. Because see, people will do that. They will think they look like toys, but for our community, they're tools. And that's where education is needed. You know, we need to educate the clergy too, but you know, one audience at a time. But you know, it's hard, but just keep trying to educate people.
Great, thank you.
I would say, sorry, the clothing. This is not expensive, and is a manipulative that really help with the fine motor skills, and you can use for the schedule. You know, my prayer time, my reading, and it's something simple and they don't look like a fidget and something that you can use.
And I don't think he's going to say no to the rosary. Again, pass out the rosaries, folks. Seriously, it works.
That's great. The one last question from Adam. Specifically, is there a major difference in approach between more catechal classroom-based faith formation and more social, relaxed youth ministry? Specifically, he's saying, you know, does the environment of a classroom or youth room make a significant difference in approach? For our youth ministers out there, I know a lot of the time we talk about classroom settings, but obviously in youth ministry settings, what are some of the things that we can also do to try and incorporate persons with disabilities in those?
Flexible seating, first one. Flexible seating. Again, those desks in a row, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan in any room of that for anybody, really. Like I said, what I think is good for this community we're speaking of is really good for everybody. Anytime you give people choices, even of where they can sit, not only also flexible seating, but options of where they sit. They're not told to sit in a certain place. And I know with youth ministry, that's probably not so much the norm, but that's a positive for our community, that they have an option. And again, you can have the yoga balls, you can have beanbag chairs, you can have some hard chairs. Some people might prefer the hard chair. Just, you know, or a pew, you know, a church pew, whatever the choices can be to mix it up, always helpful. You know, the fact that you're welcoming them and absolutely working to engage them, not just have them be present as, you know, we let you in the room. No, we want to have them engaged, building relationships with other people. You know, that right there is sign and symbol of Christ. There's nothing more catechetical, in my opinion. So yeah, we want it to be catechetical, but it can be done so in a million forms and fashions, formal and informal.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think it's a great point. You know, back when I was a youth minister, I think the first time we think about it, it's a little scary when someone comes to us, you know, because youth ministry can be, you know, very, you know, out there sometimes. And so the first time when I, you know, I had, you know, parents come to me and we're a little scared at first, but, you know, it really is just about, you know, welcoming them and being there for them. And I think that's just, you know, all we can do. And I think it's just adding these things to our lexicon, you know, that, you know, we talk about being inclusive of all people, you know, we talk about, especially now with, you know, all races, all ethnicities, and now included in that, you know, how do we include persons with disabilities, and just making sure that's a part of our conversations and any event or any program we're planning, make sure we're being inclusive of all those people and welcoming in that way. One last question. Someone said, obviously, they were very thankful that you have a lot of these resources from your website in Spanish, but are there any, I don't know if you guys have any plans for webinars in Spanish on topics like this as well?
Yes, the answer would be yes, and that will be Esther. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will be, and Esther will be hosting those for us in Spanish.
Okay.
So,
Great.
yes.
Thank you for the question. We opened, yes, the social media. We just opened Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter because we want to ensure that we're working with them. And we still, the conditions of this situation is continue. So we want to ensure we provide resources, conversations that will help in their homes with their families. And thank you for let us know. And please, our page is not ready, it's in construction. So it's not the beautiful page that we want to build for the Hispanic community, but we're working, it's a process. So it's, but the social media is ready for the people to follow us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you want to go to the last slide, just so they can have your contact information, we want to thank everybody for coming and participating. And obviously, if you have any questions, this last slide has the information, the contact information for both Charleen and Esther, and obviously their website, which you've already seen has a tremendous amount of resources in both English and Spanish. Please be sure to check that out and email either Charleen or Esther if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for being a part of this webinar, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Evan, and NFCYM. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you for the invitation.